In Genesis 2:2, we read something that sounds a bit strange, especially if we are Sabbath keepers. It says in the King James Version, "And on the seventh day, Elohim," Elohim being the Hebrew word behind God, "ended his work which he had made, and rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made." The JPS Tanakh from 1917 reads, "And on the seventh day Elohim finished his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made." Now this is strange because the seventh day is said later to be a day of complete rest in Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 through 11. The Israelites were commanded to work 6 days and rest the seventh, in remembrance of when Elohim worked 6 days and rested the seventh. When I work 6 days, I end my work on the sixth day and rest the seventh day. I don't end my work on the seventh day of the week, as Genesis 2:2 seems to say Elohim did. Some Bible translators recognize this quandary because they translate the verse something like this: "By the seventh day, Elohim had finished his work." You can see this in the NIV, CEV, ISV, and NET, among other translations. However, other Bibles actually say that Elohim finished or ended, completed his work on the sixth day rather than the seventh. So the New Heart English Bible says, "And on the sixth day Elohim finished his works which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his works which he had made." Brenton's Septuagint translation says, "And Elohim finished on the sixth day his works which he made, and he ceased on the seventh day from all his works which he made." It needs to be pointed out that the Septuagint, a BC Greek translation of the Hebrew Tanakh, Hebrew Old Testament, reads, "Elohim finished on the sixth day his works which he had made." This shows a very old reading of Elohim finishing on the sixth day rather than the seventh day in Genesis 2:2a. So why is there a discrepancy? How are we supposed to understand this? How are we to harmonize the Septuagint, a BC Greek translation of the Hebrew text of Scripture, which reads Elohim finished his work on the seventh day? Cambridge Bible for Schools and Colleges says this: "Some misunderstandings arose in very early times in consequence of these words. Jealous for the sanctity of the Sabbath, men said, no, not on the seventh day, but on the sixth day, God finished the work of creation." So we find on the sixth day is the reading of the Samaritan, the LXX, which stands for the Septuagint, and the Syriac Peshito. The mistake was not unnatural. It was not perceived that the conclusion of work was identical with the cessation from work. God wrought no work on the seventh day. Therefore it is said, "He brought his work to an end on the seventh day." The reading "on the sixth day" may be dismissed as an erroneous correction made in the interests of keeping the Sabbath. All reference to the sixth day was concluded in Genesis 1:31. However, Adam Clarke writes on Genesis 2:2, "It is the general voice of Scripture that God finished the whole of the creation in 6 days, and rested the seventh, giving us an example that we might labor 6 days and rest the seventh from all manual exercises. It is worthy of notice that the Septuagint, the Syriac, and the Samaritan read the sixth day instead of the seventh, and this should be considered the genuine reading, which appears from these versions to have been originally that of the Hebrew text. How the word sixth became changed into seventh may be easily conceived from this circumstance. It is very likely that in ancient times all the numerals were signified by letters and not by words at full length. This is the case in most ancient Greek and Latin manuscripts and in almost all the rabbinical writings. When these numeral letters became changed for words at full length, 2 letters nearly similar might be mistaken for each other. Va stands for 6, Zain for 7. How easy to mistake these letters for each other when writing the words at full length, and so give birth to the reading in question. So we see that there is an old tradition for both readings, and as you can see from the last two quotations, there are scholars promoting either reading as being the original. The Cambridge Bible says we can dismiss the sixth day reading, and Adam Clarke, a prominent theologian, commentator, Methodist commentator from the 1800s, says no, we need to take the sixth day as the original reading. I'd like to present an alternate understanding and show that there is a way that Yahweh finished his work on the sixth day and the seventh day simultaneously. And that is because a single day can be numbered as two different numbers due to it being counted in two different ways. For example, Leviticus 23:34 speaks of the 15th day of the seventh month. But verse 35 goes on to call this 15th day the first day. How can this day be both the 15th and the first? Well, it's because it is the 15th day of the month, yet the first day of the feast, in this case the Feast of Tabernacles. I've been observing Sabbaths by the lunar cycle since 1999, and I always finish my work on the sixth day of the week, and the first week of the lunar month, that's always the seventh day of the month. So the sixth day of the week is the seventh day of the month. And this is what happens the first week of each moon cycle in the lunar Sabbath model. The new moon is observed as a holy day, which is then followed by 6 working days. On the 6th working day, I finish my work. But that day is also numbered as the 7th day of the month, counting from the new moon. Now this helps us to understand how the Hebrew text of Scripture and the Septuagint are talking about the same day, even though they use two different numbers. Yahweh did finish his work on the 7th day, but not the 7th day of the week. He finished his work on the 7th day of the month, which was the 6th day of the week, preparation day. He then rested on the 7th day of the week after 6 working days, which would also be numbered as the 8th day of the moon or month. Genesis 1:1 corresponds to the new moon, day 1 of the month, followed by 6 working days, day 2 through 7, followed by the 7th day of rest, day 8 of the month. So we don't have to discredit either the Hebrew text or the Septuagint text of Genesis 2:2. That is, when we understand lunar Sabbaths. For more information, see the book titled Weekly Sabbath Days Are Determined by the Moon at the ministersnewcovenant.org book section.